I stood on the porch with a tray of homemade cinnamon rolls, still warm, wrapped in a checkered red cloth. My fingers trembled slightly from the cold. Or maybe it was the nerves. The wind stung my cheeks as I shifted the foil-covered casserole dish in the crook of my elbow and rang the bell. I heard movement inside, laughter, muffled voices, music, and then the door opened. It was Owen, my son, my only son. But instead of the grin I'd imagined, instead of the joyful, "Mom," and a hug that made the 12-hour drive from Missouri feel worth it, he frowned, not confused, not surprised, almost rehearsed. "Sorry," he said. "This house isn't for you today." I blinked. I thought he was joking. I actually laughed. "Owen, it's Christmas. I brought the—" He stepped outside and gently closed the door behind him. "We just need some space. You weren't supposed to come." I felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. "You didn't answer my texts," I said, my voice hollow. "So I assumed you were busy. I didn't want you and Lauren spending Christmas alone. I thought I'd surprise you." "You did," he said flatly. "Mom, go home." I didn't even realize I'd started crying until one teardrop landed on the foil. My hands shook as I tried to find words, but I couldn't. I turned and walked down the porch steps, the tray still in my arms. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I'd made it to my car and shut the door before my phone buzzed. A call from Owen. Maybe he regretted it. Maybe he was calling to say, "Come back, Mom." I picked up, wiping my eyes with the sleeve of my coat. Owen? But he wasn't talking to me. His voice came through the speaker, unaware the call had connected. "Calm down, Mom," he mocked, then added with a scoff. "She really thinks her money earns her a seat here." Then someone else, Lauren, I think, laughed. Well, it used to. I stared at my phone. My ears were ringing. My mouth went dry. I didn't hang up. I just listened, heart thudding like a war drum. That's when I made the decision. I opened my banking app with a single swipe. Every monthly payment, mortgage help, the utilities I'd been covering just for a little while, Owen's student loan auto transfer, canceled. One by one, quietly, calmly, like flipping switches in my soul. I didn't text. I didn't call. But by sunrise, I had 25 missed calls. And the cinnamon rolls were still in the passenger seat. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. I didn't sleep that night. Not even a little. The cinnamon rolls went cold beside me, untouched. The foil now crinkled and pulled back just enough to release the scent of cinnamon and butter that used to mean home, warmth, love. I stared at the ceiling of the motel room I found a few blocks away. Cheap, dusty, and beige in every possible way. But at least it was quiet. No one in that room rolled their eyes at me or muttered cruel jokes when they thought I couldn't hear. By 7 in the morning, the phone had rung again. Owen, for the 26th time. This time, I let it go to voicemail. He didn't leave one. I watched the sun rise through a sliver between the curtains, bathing the bland room in pale gold, and I whispered aloud like a prayer or a confession. You chose this. He had, maybe not with words, but with actions. And in that moment, I chose something too. I will not beg to be loved. By the time I checked out, my body felt like a sack of bricks, but I held myself upright. My hands still shook when I gripped the steering wheel, but not from fear anymore. From resolve. And when I pulled out of the parking lot, I didn't drive back toward their house. I didn't even glance in that direction. I started the long road home to Missouri. That stretch of highway had seen me through many versions of myself. Young mom rushing to meet her son at college, worried woman delivering casseroles after his surgeries, desperate grandmother after their miscarriage, hoping to comfort them in silence. But this version of me was new, and she didn't cry the whole way home. Not until she got there. My little yellow house with its chipped white shutters and creaky porch swing welcomed me like an old friend. I dropped my bag by the door and took a deep breath. The silence felt heavy, but not unfriendly, just waiting. That's when I saw it. An envelope sticking out of my mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Just my name in Owen's handwriting. Inside was a handwritten note. Mom, we didn't mean it like that. Lauren was upset and I didn't handle it well. Please call me. Let's talk. That's all it said. No apology, no explanation, just, we didn't mean it like that. I stood on the porch, holding that note, heart pounding in my chest. Didn't mean it like what? Like locking your mother out of your life on Christmas? Like humiliating her behind her back, thinking she wouldn't hear. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Lauren. You've made your point, but this is childish. You want to punish us by pulling the rug out? Fine, but don't expect to be invited back in. Punish them? I hadn't even raised my voice. That's when I called her. Not to scream, not to demand anything, just to say one sentence. Lauren, I said, if I was only ever welcome because of my wallet, then I was never really welcome at all. I hung up. I didn't wait for her reply. I didn't need to. And for the first time in years, I felt something I didn't recognize at first. It wasn't bitterness. It wasn't sadness. It was freedom. The next few days were oddly silent. No more calls, no more texts, just quiet. I filled the hours with things I hadn't done in months, maybe years. I cleaned out the kitchen drawers, oiled the hinges on the back door, even opened the old sewing basket I'd tucked away when my hands had gotten too stiff to thread a needle. I stitched a crooked line into a napkin and laughed. The sound startled me. That's when someone knocked at the door. I opened it, and there stood Grace Henderson, my neighbor from 3 houses down. She looked like a woman on a mission, armed with a container of sweet potato soup and a cardigan the color of ripe peaches. You've been quiet, she said. Too quiet. I hadn't realized anyone noticed. We sat on my porch, sipping soup from mismatched mugs, while the wind rattled the bare branches. She didn't ask for details. Just let me talk. And once I started, I didn't stop. I told her everything. The door on Christmas, the overheard phone call, the letter, the years of covering Owen's expenses without being asked, because it was easier to help than to watch him struggle. The dinners I cooked, the babysitting I offered, and then never got asked for again after the miscarriage. The way I kept giving, until I didn't even know how to stop. Grace listened without interruption. Then she leaned back and said, You know, it's funny. I always thought you walked like someone who owed the world an apology. But you don't owe anybody anything, Virginia, especially not people who think your worth ends where your wallet does. I nearly cried, but I didn't. I just nodded, clutching the warm mug with both hands. The next morning, I opened my mailbox and found something I hadn't expected. A bill, not from a company, but a Venmo printout, stuck in a plain envelope. Lauren had printed a request for January daycare shortfall, highlighted it, and wrote in neat cursive. Since you're no longer helping automatically, we'll need the funds manually this month. No please, no thank you, just expectation. I didn't respond. Instead, I called the local bank, where I'd helped Owen get a co-signed loan for his graduate degree nearly 10 years ago. I asked what it would take to remove my name. The woman on the other end of the line was kind, but blunt. Unless the other party refinances in their own name, your name stays on the debt. I thanked her and hung up. So I drove down there in person. Grace came with me. She sat in the car, knitting while I walked into the bank and spoke with a manager, someone I'd known since high school. I explained the situation. I showed proof of my canceled payments. And I asked, with as much calm as I could muster, what my legal options were if I no longer wanted to be tethered to a son who now treated me like a checkbook with feet. He looked at me for a long moment and said, "You'll have to push for a refinance or take legal action, but I'll help you draft the letter." For the first time, someone stood with me, not out of obligation, but because it was right. I left with the first draft of a letter that could force Owen to finally take responsibility. And I wasn't afraid. I mailed the letter on a Tuesday morning. I watched the envelope slide into the blue metal box like it was a piece of my soul, sealed, final, and completely out of my hands. The draft was polite, but firm. It laid out the facts: that I was no longer willing to be financially liable for a grown man's debt, that I had supported Owen for years, that it was now his turn to step up and take responsibility, and that if he didn't initiate a refinance within 60 days, I would be pursuing legal options. I didn't expect a thank you. I expected silence, or maybe more thinly veiled insults disguised as texts from Lauren. What I didn't expect was Owen showing up on my porch. He looked thinner, pale. His button-down shirt was wrinkled, his hair uncombed like he hadn't slept. He didn't knock right away, just stood there, staring at the welcome mat like it held the answers he couldn't find. When he finally did knock, I opened the door slowly. "Hi, Mom," he said. His voice cracked. "Can I come in?" Part of me wanted to say no, to protect the quiet I'd built these last few days. But some deeper instinct, a mother's reflex, maybe, made me step aside. He sat at the kitchen table, hands curled into fists, eyes darting around the room like it had changed since he was a child. It hadn't. The table was the same one he used to do homework at, the same one where I sat up at night balancing checkbooks and writing out checks for his school supplies. He didn't touch the tea I offered him. "I got the letter," he said. "And I get it, okay? But you don't have to go nuclear on us." "Nuclear?" I repeated, setting down my mug with a soft clink. "Owen." I didn't scream. I didn't show up banging on your door. I canceled payments. That's all. I stopped doing the thing no one thanked me for in the first place. He flinched. "That's not fair." "Neither was Christmas morning," I said. He looked down. Lauren was upset. She didn't want any tension. She just wanted a quiet holiday. "And so you uninvited your own mother without even telling me." He rubbed his face. "You always made things easier. I think I forgot what it felt like to manage things alone." There it was. A crack, a glimpse of truth. I was never supposed to carry all of it, I said quietly. And the fact that I did, that's not love, Owen. That's convenience. He didn't argue. "I didn't come here to fight," he said. "I came to ask if you'd consider pausing the letter. Just give me a few more months. I'm applying for a new job, and Lauren's between clients." I felt it again. That old reflex to swoop in, fix it, make it better. But I looked at his face, and I remembered the phone call, the laughter, the tone. I remembered my hands trembling as I canceled each transfer. "I'm not going to take the letter back," I said. "You'll figure it out." "You always would have. I was the one who got in the way of that." His eyes welled with tears. He looked like the boy I used to bandage knees for and sing lullabies to. "Mom." "I love you, Owen," I said. "But I'm not going back to being the solution to everything. That's not a life. It's a slow death." We sat there in silence, and for once, I let it stay silent. When he finally left, he hugged me, but this time, I didn't feel pulled into his storm. I felt steady. 3 days passed before I heard from Lauren. I was pruning the front hedges, badly, I'll admit, when the notification popped up on my phone. Not a call, a post. Lauren had taken to Facebook. It was a long paragraph, public, dramatic, and so carefully worded it felt like it had been workshopped. Sometimes, it read, people who raised you in love grow bitter with age. They rewrite history. They punish you with silence and withheld support just when your family needs stability the most. I guess some people want control more than connection. I won't name names, but I hope one day certain people remember what it means to love without conditions. Within an hour, there were 27 likes and a dozen comments, most vague. Stay strong, girl, and family's supposed to lift you up. But a few stung more because I recognized the names. One was from Amanda Rollins, a former neighbor who used to sit at my kitchen table, drinking my lemonade and praising my cinnamon rolls. Another from Ellie's preschool teacher, who'd once cried on my shoulder during her divorce. None of them reached out to ask what had happened. I sat on the porch swing, the clippers still in my lap, reading the post again and again. The words blurred as tears welled up, but not from guilt, from the realization that Lauren hadn't just tried to control me privately. She wanted to shame me publicly. Grace came by with peach cobbler and caught me mid-scroll. I handed her the phone without a word. She read the post slowly, then snorted. She's lucky you're not the kind of woman who claps back with screenshots and receipts. I smiled, barely. I just never thought they'd try to spin this like I'm the villain. Because they can't afford to let people know you stopped paying for everything. It's easier to paint you as cold than admit they were leaning on you like scaffolding. We sat in silence for a while, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows on the grass. Then she added, "You know what you should do. Come to the church luncheon this Saturday. Just bring your face and your freedom. That's all. People need to see you." I hesitated. I hadn't been to a social function in months, maybe years. Not since Russell passed. Not since Owen's birthdays stopped including invitations. But maybe it was time. So that Saturday, I brushed my hair, pulled on my best navy blouse, and showed up with Grace. The room was filled with chatter, clinking glasses, casserole dishes, and old hymns playing softly from a speaker in the corner. I saw heads turn when I walked in, not in pity, but in curiosity. I was a ghost returning to life. Margaret from the post office hugged me. Pastor Tom asked if I'd consider reading scripture next Sunday. Even Ellie's old teacher, the one who'd commented on Lauren's post, came over and said quietly, "I didn't know what she meant. I'm sorry if I misunderstood." I nodded. It's all right. Stories change depending on who's telling them. As we left, Grace squeezed my arm. You looked them all in the eye. That's how healing starts. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like a woman who'd been discarded. I felt seen. The Sunday after the luncheon, I walked past Russell's old office, and for reasons I couldn't quite explain, stopped. The door had been closed since the week after the funeral. I always told myself I'd get to it eventually, that someday I'd clean it out, maybe donate his books, sort through the drawer of tangled chargers and old receipts. But every time I reached for the handle, something in my chest tightened. This time, I turned the knob and stepped inside. The room smelled faintly of cedar and paper. Dust floated through the beam of morning light that fell across his desk. His reading glasses still sat atop his yellow legal pad, like he'd just stepped out to grab a cup of coffee. I sank into his chair and let the silence settle around me. Russell had been the calm one, the quiet listener. When Owen and I butted heads over school, girlfriends, college loans, he was the one who would gently pull me aside and say, "He'll learn. Let him." But I never could. I'd always swooped in with solutions, checkbooks, casseroles, especially after Russell passed. I think some part of me believed that if I kept fixing things, I'd keep the pieces of our family from slipping too far apart. I poured myself into Owen's life because the silence in this house was too loud otherwise. I opened the bottom drawer and found what I didn't even realize I'd been looking for: an old letter from Russell, one he'd written for my 50th birthday. It wasn't fancy, just a few lines in his neat, upright handwriting. "You love fiercely, Ginny, but sometimes you forget you don't have to earn your place in the world. You already have one. Just be." I pressed the paper to my chest and cried, quietly, freely, not out of grief, but because I finally understood. That afternoon, I framed that letter and hung it above the sewing table. Later, I went through boxes in the attic: old baby clothes, photos, Owen's hand-painted art from kindergarten. I didn't throw anything out. I just held it, acknowledged it, and let it be, like Russell had said. And then came the knock on the door. This time, it wasn't Owen or Grace. It was Margaret from the church committee. She wore a thick scarf and bright red lipstick that didn't quite match her coat, but her smile was warm and unshakable. "Ginny," she said, "we've been talking, and we'd love for you to help organize the spring charity gala. You've always had an eye for detail." I blinked. "Me?" "Yes, you. We need someone steady, someone respected, someone who's shown real backbone lately." I almost laughed. "Think about it," she said. "You'd be perfect." After she left, I stood in the foyer for a long moment, holding the flyer she gave me. For years, my whole identity had been wrapped around being needed by Owen and Lauren. And now, here was someone asking me to step into something, not because I was needed, but because I was valued. That night, I poured myself a cup of tea and stared at the flyer. Then I picked up the phone. "Hi, Margaret. I'd love to help." The week I started planning the charity gala, the air felt different in my lungs. I had a clipboard, a purpose, and a schedule that didn't revolve around Owen or Lauren's needs. Margaret looped me into every decision, from the color of the tablecloths to the music playlist. And before I knew it, my phone was buzzing, not with passive-aggressive texts, but with questions like, "Do you think daffodils or tulips for the centerpieces?" And, "Can we use your peach cobbler recipe for dessert?" I hadn't felt this necessary in years, not needed in the way Lauren used to treat me, like an ATM with an apron, but necessary, like I added something to the room. On Friday afternoon, I was setting out pamphlets at the community hall when I heard a voice behind me. "I heard you're the star of the show now." I turned. Lauren, hair flat, eyes tired, expression tight. She held her purse like a shield and wore a smile so fake I could hear the glue peeling. I didn't flinch. "Didn't expect to see you here." "I didn't come for the event," she said, her eyes scanning the decorations. "I came to ask if we can talk." I folded my arms. "About what?" She dropped her voice. "Owen's falling apart. He's exhausted. The refinance stuff is stressing him out. He's worried about daycare bills, groceries, all of it." I waited. "I told him you'd come around," she added, "that this distance is temporary, but you've made your point, haven't you?" I stared at her, calm as ever. "You think this is about making a point?" "Isn't it?" she asked, one brow rising. "Cutting off support. Ignoring messages. Acting like we did something unforgivable when all we asked for was a little space on Christmas." My voice didn't rise, but it settled into something firmer. "You didn't ask. You shut me out. Then you mocked me. Then you sent me a bill." Her lips parted, then closed again. "I didn't choose this distance," I continued. "You did. And now you're asking me to patch it up because the money dried up, not because you're sorry." Her eyes burned. "You act like we're monsters." "No," I said. "I act like I finally woke up." She stepped back like I'd struck her, then recovered with a huff. "People are starting to talk." "Let them," I replied. "They've seen who I am, and now they're seeing who you are." She left, heels tapping fast against the linoleum. Later that evening, I got a call from Owen. I expected him to be angry. He wasn't. He sounded small. "Mom," he said, "I don't know how to fix this." "I know," I whispered, "but you can start by deciding who you want to be when no one's bailing you out." There was a long pause. "I miss you," he said. "Not the money. You." It was the first honest thing I'd heard from him in years. I didn't promise anything. I just said, "Then let's see who we both are, without the old patterns." That weekend, at the gala, I stood on stage in front of 80 people and gave a short speech about generosity. I didn't mention Owen or Lauren, but I did say this: real generosity doesn't erase us, it expands us, and real love doesn't ask us to shrink. The applause was soft but steady, and as I stepped down, I saw Owen near the back. Alone, no Lauren, hands in his pockets. He clapped too. I didn't expect to hear from Owen again so soon, but the very next morning, he showed up at my house. No call, no text, just his car pulling into the driveway like it used to when he was home from college, dragging laundry bags and a hungry stomach behind him. Only this time, he stepped out slowly, shoulders stiff, hands empty. I opened the door before he could knock. He looked different, less like the boy I raised, and more like a man realizing no one was coming to clean up his mess. "I signed the refinance papers," he said, voice low. "It's done." I blinked. I hadn't even followed up on the deadline yet. "I'll send you confirmation when it clears," he added, then looked down at his shoes. I figured. I owed you that much. There was a time when those words, "I owe you," would have been followed by an apology so laced with guilt and excuses, it collapsed on itself. But this wasn't that. There was no groveling, no hidden ask. Just a man standing in front of the mother he'd misjudged, trying to carry his own weight for the first time. I stepped aside. "Coffee?" He nodded. We sat at the kitchen table, the same place where years of hurt had brewed under the surface like weak tea. But this time, the silence between us wasn't heavy. It was honest. "I don't know if Lauren and I are gonna make it," he said eventually, staring into his mug. "She's angry, says I'm changing, says I let you win." "I'm not in competition with your wife, Owen." He nodded. "I know, but she sees you setting boundaries as betrayal, and I think part of me used to agree." I didn't respond. I let him sit in his own words. "I think I was scared of who I'd be without the support," he added. "The help, the fallback plan. But you were right. That wasn't love. That was dependency, and it made me lazy. I blamed you for problems I created." My throat tightened, but I stayed still. "Do you think," he said, eyes flicking toward me, "there's a way back? For us?" "I think there's a way forward," I said. "But it won't look like what we had before. I won't be your lifeline. I won't be your silence." He nodded again, slowly, thoughtfully. "That's fair." We didn't talk long. He didn't linger. But when he hugged me goodbye this time, it felt like something real, not transactional, not desperate, just human. Later that evening, Grace and I were having dinner at the diner in town, chicken fried steak, like we used to order back when our husbands were alive, and we thought widow was a word that belonged to other women. Midway through our meal, the bell above the door rang, and in walked Lauren, alone. She didn't notice me at first. She slid into a booth near the window, fidgeting with her phone, her mouth pressed in that tight little line I'd come to know too well. After a few minutes, she finally looked up and saw us. I raised my glass of iced tea, just slightly. She didn't wave, she didn't smile, but she looked away quickly like she couldn't hold my gaze. Grace leaned in. "She's unraveling." "I know," I said, "and I'm not picking up the pieces this time." We finished dinner, laughed about nothing, walked out into the cool night without looking back. For the first time, I realized I was no longer orbiting anyone else's gravity. I was standing on my own. The next morning, a thick envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address, just my name in large, careful print. Inside were copies of Owen's refinance paperwork, a sticky note that read, "Officially off the hook, love, O." It felt less like freedom and more like a quiet exhale. I tucked the papers into my filing cabinet, not out of spite, but finality. Later that week, Margaret from the church invited me to speak at a women's circle about second chapters. At first, I almost said no. I wasn't sure I had any wisdom to offer, just a collection of bruises I'd finally stopped covering. But Grace gave me that look, the one that said, "You've come too far to shrink now." So I said yes. I spoke about giving without strings, about remembering who you were before someone else told you who to be. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. The women in the room nodded like they'd lived it too. Afterward, a woman approached me. She was younger than me by at least a decade, but her face carried something familiar, exhaustion from always being the one who smoothed over the mess. She said, "I needed to hear that. My daughter thinks I'm a villain because I stopped paying her rent." But I was drowning. I put a hand on her arm. "Let her think what she needs to think. For now. Truth has a longer shelf life than resentment." She hugged me, hard, and in that moment I realized this was what healing looked like. Not fireworks or grand apologies, but showing up in your own life without apology. That night, as I folded laundry, my phone buzzed. A text from Owen. "Can I stop by tomorrow?" "Just me. I need to say something." I replied, "Yes. Come early. Grace is bringing scones." He arrived just after 9. No suit, no stiff shoulders, just jeans, a sweater, and eyes that looked clear for the first time in years. He sat at the kitchen table and held a small envelope. "I wanted to show you something," he said. "It's not much, but I applied for a job. A second one. Nights, just until we get stable." I nodded. "That's a good step." He looked down, then back at me. "Lauren doesn't like it. She said I was choosing humiliation over pride." "And what did you say?" I told her maybe pride was the problem, and maybe for once I needed to earn my life instead of inheriting one. He took a deep breath. "I'm thinking about leaving." I paused. "Her?" He nodded. "It's been ugly. She's bitter that I'm not siding with her, that I won't demand you come crawling back. But I don't want to live in that kind of noise anymore." I looked at him, not as my son, but as a man choosing something painful over something toxic, and I saw courage. "I can't tell you what to do," I said, "but I can tell you this. Peace is worth starting over for." He nodded. His eyes shone. "I just want to be someone my daughter could be proud of." The words hit me like wind in a closed room. He stood to leave, then stopped and pulled something else from his coat. A photo. An old one of us. Taken years ago at a pumpkin patch. He must have found it in the attic. "I keep this now," he said. "Not to guilt myself. Just to remember who you were when I still saw you clearly." My voice caught in my throat. "Thank you, Mom," he said. "Not for the money. Not for the years. Just thank you." After he left, I stood in the doorway for a long time. The sun was rising, and I knew we weren't done, but we were finally starting something honest. It was the first Easter I'd spent alone in years. And I mean really alone. No Owen. No forced invitations. No pretending. I woke up early, made coffee, and sat by the window with a cinnamon roll I'd frozen back in December. I warmed it, not out of nostalgia, but as a symbol. I could finally enjoy something sweet without wondering who would take the last piece, or what unspoken price came with serving it. Around 10, Grace called. "You coming to service?" "I think I'm going to stay home today," I said. "Just this once." She didn't press. "You deserve whatever peace looks like." After the call, I walked through the house, through rooms that no longer echoed with obligation. I passed the photo Owen had left, now resting on the sideboard. I didn't cry. I just smiled. And then, mid-afternoon, the doorbell rang. I opened it expecting Grace or maybe one of the ladies from church, but it was Lauren. Hair tied back, eyes red, mouth trembling. She held a grocery store bouquet, yellow daisies, slightly wilted, and a small paper bag. "I know I shouldn't be here," she said before I could speak. But I didn't know where else to go. I said nothing, only stepped aside. She entered like a woman walking through fog. She didn't sit, just stood in the foyer, staring at the photo on the sideboard. "I always thought if I kept control, I'd feel safe," she said quietly. "But it only made me lonelier and crueler." Still, I didn't speak. "Owen left," she added, turning toward me. "2 days ago. Took just one bag and said he needed to learn who he was without me. Or you." The words didn't sting. They sounded like truth, honest and painful, the kind that clears a path. "I blamed you," she said. "For so much. For making him soft. For reminding him he deserved better. But really, I was just afraid. Afraid he'd see me for what I was becoming." She held out the paper bag. "These are the baby clothes, the ones you bought for Ellie. I found them in a box. I thought you might want to keep them." I took the bag gently. "Thank you." She nodded, backing toward the door. "I don't expect forgiveness. I didn't want silence to be the last thing between us." I studied her. This wasn't performance. This wasn't manipulation. This was a woman who had lost more than just control. She'd lost herself. "You don't need my forgiveness," I said softly. "You need your own." Her eyes brimmed. She opened the door, but paused before stepping out. "If he ever comes home again, I hope he comes here first." And then she left. I stood in the hallway for a long time, the bag still in my hands. I walked to the sewing room and opened it. Inside were the smallest shoes I'd ever bought, pale yellow with white laces. I sat down, shoes in my lap, and remembered holding them in the store, imagining a future that never came. And yet, something had been born from it all. I opened the drawer beside me and placed the shoes next to Russell's letter. That evening, I sat out on the porch, warm tea in hand, listening to the wind rustle through the trees, and then I heard footsteps. Owen. No words. No fanfare. Just him walking up the path like he used to when he was a boy who trusted the world. He sat beside me, and for a while we didn't speak. Then I said, "I saw her." "I figured you might," he replied. "She's lost, Owen." "I know." We sipped our tea. She said she hoped if you ever came home again, you'd come here first. He looked over, eyes soft. "I never left this house, Mom. Not really." And for the first time in years, I believed him. Because love, real love, doesn't ask us to erase ourselves. It simply waits for us to return, whole and finally ready.